think it's time for you to have your lysergic acid. Drink this down and... Mojo Radio.
Welcome back to Requiem Radio. You have myself, Sola Requiem, and my co-host here, Hazy Dialects. And with us today, we have the pleasure and privilege to have Kyle Meeks here, who is a real estate agent, and he's going to be talking about the nuance of real estate and going into more of the details of what really got him into that role and like answering some questions for us. But more importantly, he's going to elaborate some other things. So, yeah, Hazy, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, actually. How you guys doing? It's Hazy Dialects, your favorite infrequent schizo poster on Twitter accounts who has sensible but sometimes irrational takes about particular subject matters he finds intriguing. You're seeing this all in HD and with our special guest who will tell us about his expertise. Would you like to delve into them now?
Yeah, would you like to introduce yourself for us, Kyle?
Yeah, hey, my name's Kyle Meeks. I'm a real estate agent in Washington, D.C. I service Northern Virginia and Southern Maryland.
And interesting. Just for the crowd, in terms of introductions, is there anything you do online that's particularly astute, like something that I would say that the crowd can really engage with, or is majority of stuff offline? And if there is anything online you want to particularly to know about, let them know right now, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I have like social media like most people do, but I wouldn't say that's by any stretch of imagination the big, like the bulk of my business. But I have a website, social media as far as my digital calling card.
Okay, and we're here now. We're here to talk about economics, and some of the specialties of our particular guest here is about finances. He has a vast level of knowledge about these sort of subject matters, but in terms of like grounding yourself and the know-how, one of the most fascinating things I think most people don't really take into account when they're going for like larger goals and setting themselves up financially, what do you think are some basic e-coms know-hows that people don't like know about or either undervalue by like the common person trying to get into the field?
You're talking about to like get into real estate?
Yes.
Okay. I would think just having enough set aside where you can focus on this full time and not have to be a part-time agent. I think, a lot of people approach real estate and think they're just going to get their real estate license, that it's one of these careers that you can really do part-time. And the reality is it's a full-time job on top of a full-time job. And especially when you're first getting started, you are doing a lot of work for no money. You're self-employed and you're everything. You pay for your cell phone, your healthcare, all of your marketing expenses. And the biggest thing that's going to help you be successful is if you're able to do some type of transition where you set aside enough money where you can kind of ease that burden, where you're not so just quote unquote desperate for cash, where it clouds your judgment call when you're trying to do transactions, and you have enough to just sustain yourself until you can actually start generating and having money come in.
Interesting. So for most people, when it comes to like basically being part of real estate, you want to have a good financial cushion so you can do the job and just focus on the idea of just doing it rather than trying to ensure whether or not you have enough money for like a month's time or what the time. Like it's primarily about the idea that you're just ensuring that you have a good cushion for the entire time and ensuring that when you make the transition to real estate, it's to ensure that you don't have to worry about the little things. It's mainly and primarily for for the focuses of ensuring that real estate can be it can be your all. Like you can give it 100% of your time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think being able to come into this, approach it like you would any other full-time job, and you're able to focus on this 40 hours a week and not have to worry about how you're going to pay your bills and not have to try to do this part-time while you're transitioning from another full-time job, to approach this like it's a true business, but having that financial relief where you're able to do that. And so I think that's why it's so important to have some type of financial win or have some type of financial cushion that you can fall back on while you're building your business until you can actually start selling real estate until you get your first few transactions.
Interesting.
And how long?
Go ahead.
Yeah, and how long have you been in real estate business?
I've been a full-time agent for about 7 years now.
And what price range do you typically work in? Because I know you said you do DC, and what else again? You said New Hampshire?
So I'm in DC, Maryland, and Virginia.
Okay. And
So
your price range usually?
Yeah, so licensed in 3 places. I would say, the majority of my business is probably around, I don't know, like average sales probably like $1.5 million, but you represent stuff all over. It's a range. Like I've got a listing right now for $8 million, and I have a listing right now for $540,000. I definitely focus on, I do a little bit more of the higher end market. So the majority of the stuff that I work with is probably over $1.5 million, but it fluctuates. You're kind of all over.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've spoken to a few other real estate agents before, and there's a common trend where I see where people who are interested in getting to that field, they say they're going to make it big by going to either like Vegas or Miami or any of these like really hot spots, if you will. Would you say that as being a good term, or is that like a very high risk, high reward type scenario?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There's only a couple of markets around the country where that actually support these larger price tags for real estate. The majority of the country is not that, but you go to like Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, Miami, and you've got homes that are 10, 20, 30, 40, $50 million or more. We're not as flashy of a market in DC. There are definitely homes that are 10, 20, 30 million in this market. But I wouldn't say that's just the norm like it is in New York or Miami or Los Angeles. The one thing that sets DC apart from those markets is we are very stable. So your question was, would you go to one of the other markets, or is it too much of a gamble? I think the other markets like the Los Angeles, New York, Miami, they're very susceptible for what's happening in the economy and what's happening in the market. So meaning the economy's not good, those markets are going to tank. If interest rates go up, those markets are going to fill it. A market like DC, we don't necessarily ride the same trends as the rest of the country. We've got our local economy is anchored to the Hill, so everything's attached to the federal government. If the DC market crashes, the entire world has a bigger problem because our local economy is the federal government. So while we feel trends, ups and downs of the market, it's definitely softened in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. So I would come to a place like DC if I was trying to make it big. Not only do we have a much higher price point than the rest of the country, we're much more stable.
Oh, sounds nice. And you were speaking earlier about the market. Is there any like signs, I guess, you could pick out or notice? Like, is it just like either like just paying attention to the news, or do you look at like stock market, or like what do you look for, I guess, your go-to to be like, oh, the market may not do so hot, or the market's booming?
Well, interest rates are a huge indicator, especially for the 2 million and below market. We're hovering around 8% interest for a 30-year fixed. So definitely that's an indicator of how much activity is going to be there. a lot of people who are currently in the market are priced out. They can no longer afford real estate, especially in the lower price points. So I think that in the economy, you kind of look at what the economy's doing, the job report, and that's an indicator of what's the real estate market going to look like. And the interesting thing that's happened over the last couple of years is we've had continuing interest rates, but still a very strong economy. So where we are right now in the market, it's starting to slow down, especially in everything below 2 million. I think that market's probably being impacted the most because of interest rates. But anything over 2 million is just kind of business as usual. Once you reach that price point, the majority of the people who are out looking are typically cash buyers anyways. They're not really susceptible to what's happening in the economy. It's not really as susceptible to what's happening with interest rates.
All right. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense then, definitely. And you wouldn't say that the real estate as a career would be like, unfeasible if, let's say, the market isn't doing too hot, or is it still like you can make a living? Because I've heard some people who say like, oh, I would be a real estate agent, but, the economy fluctuates too much where it's not worth it. Like, what would you say to those people? Like, would you still recommend like getting into it even if the economy doesn't do too hot, or if it does good?
Well, no. If anyone approaches it with that attitude, they're not cut out for this industry. Tell them to go get a corporate job or a 9-to-5 job where you're working for someone else. Normal ups and downs, those are normal trends in any market. And if you're a good agent, there's opportunity in a down market or a hot market. So I think the people who get in it when it's easy are the first people to exit when it gets hard. A true agent, someone who's really good at this job, is going to be able to ride the wave no matter what happens, because there's opportunity in every market. And this is actually a cleansing. We're starting to see people get out of the market right now, or get out of this career field right now. And those were not good agents. Those were people who were pretty weak at their craft. But when interest rates were 2.5%, it was very easy to make money. And now that you actually have to work to get deals closed, which deals are very hard right now, you have to do a lot of work to get something over the finish line. And a lot of people just never develop that skill set. So I don't think people exiting is a bad thing. It's a natural cleansing.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. Like any market, people just come and go, basically. But I like that mentality where it's like basically you have to be very optimistic in this job field. Like if you have any like hints of like pessimism, like, oh, why am I doing this? Then you're not gonna like make it big. Like you probably skate by, but you won't go far with the career.
Exactly.
I suppose it also means that you have to have a certain mind for that type of job. And when it comes to that, what sort of like inclination about the market or things to look for do you think like a person has to have, like in terms of how they evaluate the market? What do you think is like your best like tools, and what do you think typically for a realtor market, like a realtor, like what are like some really good qualities for them to have as people?
I think the biggest thing is mindset. How are you going to come in and approach this? Because this job is 90% rejection. I mean, that's just the reality of it. You're in a sales job that you're self-employed and you're self-generating everything. So 90% of your life is just one big rejection. You have to be able to operate within that 10%, that success, and not let that 90% break you, because it can be challenging when you're constantly told no. But that one time that you're told yes, it can literally be life changing. You could easily make in one sell what most people make in a year. So I think the one key thing to this business, it doesn't necessarily matter your background, your education. It doesn't matter your how in tune you are to be able to quote unquote predict the market. I think it comes down to your work ethic and your mentality. Are you a victim or are you a player? If you're a player, you'll always find success in this. If you're a hustler and you're someone who can get up and keep going and pick yourself up, then this is definitely an industry for you.
That makes a lot of sense considering the fact that this is one of the biggest investments that a person can get into. So when people look at how wealthy and how lucrative a job like real estate can be, most people don't, at least I think the people who are coming into it very short-sighted don't seem to realize that this is a job where you're going to be engaging people who are going to, or at least at the very least, attempting to make one of the biggest purchases of their lives. Like it's not, it's far more of an investment than just simply a car or a watch or something that you could sell at a cart or guys. It's one of those things that like is a serious consideration. So the ratio of people that might drop off or decline or get cold feet at the idea of the purchase seems sensible to me, that the range of like no's you might get are going to be at a high percentile. So at best, I would say that one of the biggest qualities you should or ought to have if you're going to be in a business of this nature is that you need resilience, correct?
Correct. Absolutely. Well said.
With that being said, did you always know you had like a proclivity for this, or did you like one day stumble upon it, or was it advised by a friend?
I've always been in sales in some capacity. Either working for a corporation, doing outside sales, inside sales. So I've always been I've always been into sales. I had a corporate career before this. I was in telecom, and I really loved what I was doing, and I really loved the telecom industry. And it was fast paced and fascinating. I was managing outside salespeople. And at the time, I thought it was a lot of money. I was like, and it still is a lot of money. Nothing compared to what I make in real estate. But I was working for Sprint, and they were going through a lot of mergers and just merger after merger. And my position was coming up for elimination because of a restructure. And I was just completely burned out with what I was doing. So I decided to get my real estate license. And it wasn't even that I really decided it. It was a friend who was a business coach, but really good friend as well. In California, his family owned a real estate coaching company called Buffini and Company, which is one of the largest real estate coaching companies in the country. And he had, known me professionally and personally for many years. And I was thinking of going into like another telecom position. He just knew me. He's like, you'd be really, really, really good in real estate. And I kind of thought he was crazy at first. And I just was like, there's like no money in that at first. It takes way too long to get started. And he's like, just trust me. You should talk to one of my friends who's a real estate agent in DC who's very successful. So he made the connection. We talked. We hit it off. So I went and started working with this guy. He taught me everything that I knew. And it was the best thing that I had ever done. I mean, I didn't really make any money for a year. It's one of those jobs where you just work, and then nothing, and then it all happens. And so I had to get past that mentally because I was doing pretty good in my corporate career. But I am so grateful that I didn't go back to corporate America. Working for myself and having the flexibility to make unlimited money. You can make as much money as you want in this. There's no one's going to cap you. I'm my own boss. I wake up when I want. I do what I want. I don't answer to anyone. I'm so grateful that I had someone on my side that could kind of take a look from the outside and say, I think you'd thrive here. And someone who I trusted enough to kind of nudge me in that direction. So that's kind of how I got into it.
And you were speaking earlier about you had a friend who helped you through this. Would you say the real estate market as well is kind of like a buddy system where there's always like someone who like gets you in the door and like teaches you all the know-abouts? Or in another example, like do you often like go to like social events to like meet more people or possible like clientele, if you will?
So you're saying to get started in the real estate business?
Yeah, just for your experience. Yeah, like would you say like for, I guess, real estate, it's usually, almost like a master apprentice type thing at first where you have someone who teaches you? Or how often do you see people just come in like, by themselves and they just figure it out as they go along?
Yeah, it's a really hard industry to get into that, just to get into. There's no manual, there's no like training course, there's no it's so incredibly easy to get your real estate license. It's just a test that you take, but the thing is, the test teaches you nothing about being a real estate agent. It teaches you, laws that you might not necessarily even need to know. It's more than your lender needs to know it or your closing attorney needs to know it. There's ethical things it teaches you, but it doesn't teach you how to be a real estate agent. There's nothing on there about how to get clients, how to manage a transaction, what to do if this happens. I think the fastest way to success in this is getting a mentor. I have to 100% say, find a mentor, someone that's in this business that is active and successful in this business that will let you mentor with them, and they'll teach you how to do it. Because there's just too much to know, and every transaction is different. I've been doing this for 7 years, and you still learn new things as they get presented to you. Meaning that no transaction is the same because no two people are the same, right? Every transaction is going to come with its own challenges and its own things that you're going to have to creatively try to figure out. So you could start. I think if you came in to this just having someone to see be successful. And like for me, the first year was just seeing someone who was making so much money that was so incredibly successful to actually so I could witness that this is achievable, that this could be done. So just for the support factor in that regard, I think it's worth partnering with someone. But someone who's truly a good agent, who's successful, that's it. I mean, I would definitely want to be around them because I want to know what are they doing to get the clients they're getting, and how can I get there faster?
Agreed. Would you say, for you personally, what would you say that I've heard that people that have different unique skills when they get into the market, there are certain things that make other people stand out from their competitors. What would that be for you? What would you say that you have that makes you stand out from your competition of other agents?
I really do a lot of off-market transactions. So I think about 20% of the transactions that I do are homes that are not on the market. And so when people are coming to me, one thing that sets me apart from other agents, especially when you're trying to buy a house, is to go out and be able to find a home that's not in the MLS. And so that would be something that would set me apart, because 20% of the transactions that I do are typically inventory that just doesn't exist. And I'm finding that by either approaching homeowners to see if they want to directly sell their home, or just through my network of agents that I've got in this city, to try to find stuff that they are going to bring to market in the near future and get it in front of my clients before anyone else.
Would you be able to provide an example of a property that was probably your most lucrative sale? Or you mentioned earlier you're dealing with one that was like $8 million. Has you ever won anything above that?
Have I sold anything above that? No.
So good luck. This is going to be your biggest sale then, correct?
Well, as of right now, sure, yeah.
Yeah, best of luck for that, definitely. I know there's also a lot of, I guess, things that people don't consider when it comes to real estate. Like, you have to get the inspector, you have to get, a mortgage broker, like all these different, I guess, other professionals to come in and like inspect something. Is that more for like a seller specific market or like a buyer, or is that both? Like you always need these things for properties?
Well, it's always going to be the buyer, and you're going to need it really in any market. And so if you're buying a house, if you're not paying cash, you're going to need a lender, so a mortgage broker. You need to do your due diligence with inspections if you're going to buy a house. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to put a home inspection contingency in your offer. You might go in before you make the offer and do what's called a pre-inspection, but you kind of want to know what you're getting into. So whatever various inspections you're going to need, the first being a home inspection, and if it's on a well or septic tank, you'd want to do inspections on those. If it has a pool, you'd want to do a pool inspection. But you just want to make sure you're not buying something that you're not prepared that's going to need a major repair. And again, if it's a quote-unquote seller's market, Maybe it's not something that you're putting in a contract, meaning I'm going to do this home inspection after we ratify the contract, and I'm going to make this inspection contingent on the sale. But it's something, because it's, it's such a hot market, you still want to win that house, you still want to have the information, you do what's called an inspection. So I'm going to come in, do the same inspection, not going to make my contract contingent on it. If everything checks out, I'm going to make the offer. But if we are in more of a buyer's market, then there's no reason to do that up front. If it's not a competitive situation, we'll just load it down with every inspection and tell the seller, this is going to be contingent upon my home inspection. And I'd also ask the seller for repairs if it's not a competitive situation, meaning I will buy the house if you fix the HVAC, because we found it's bad in the home inspection.
All right. Yeah, go ahead.
One of the things I thought was kind of interesting is that when it comes to just basic jargon, like the AP, for instance, or sometimes rebate, some of this jargon can often go over the commoner head. A layman, in a sense, is often not equipped to typically understand the jargon that is often apropos for the avenue that, a realtor gets into to understand how to sell and maximize the property that they're getting to the market. When it comes to these expertise, these talents that they usually have, what do you think really seals the deal more often than not? Is it usually that sort of knowledge, or is it a level of charisma that can really do a good job of understanding how to entice and invite the person to understand what type of deal they're getting?
So I just want to make sure I understand the question. Is it how are you anticipate? Are
you usually doing this? My apologies. I'm typically asking in terms of maybe this would probably be a better question. When it comes to people that you're selling to, are you usually leveraging just the interaction in of itself, or are you doing a balancing act of their knowledge? Are you selling them based off of the knowledge, or is it more like a charisma thing when they encounter us? Is it just energy, or? So I'm asking. I was just interested in.
Sure, I think it's two different aspects or two different approaches. If it's who you're representing in the transaction. Mm-hmm. If you're representing the buyer, what I do is get to know the buyer. What is going to inspire them to write the check every month to get them into this house. Mm-hmm. And then I don't just go and put them in front of properties and try to quote unquote sell them. I try to find exactly what they're looking for and let the house really do the talking for me, right? Because you've told me you want a big backyard and open concept on a quiet street. I'm going to find that and get you into the home, and it's more just you can kind of see that they're having the emotional reaction to the house. So in that regard, I think it's more just being intuitive enough to listen to actually what the buyer is telling you they want, and then finding the right home. If you're working for the seller and your job is to market the property, it's a little bit different, because you're not just looking for one buyer. In that regard, presentation is everything, and what you want to do is kind of scale things back and scale things down. That's gonna and so you can capture a larger audience. And so what I mean by that is, if someone has a lot of wallpaper in their house or a bunch of bold colors, I'd come in and paint things white, because white's going to resonate with 98% of people. Take down all the personal effects, so I don't want to see your dog photos or your family portraits. Declutter it. I want to make this a somewhat of a blank space. I want stuff in it, but not so much stuff where I can't picture myself in it. And the goal there is to try to elicit as many responses from the market and get as many showings as possible, and hopefully let it go into multiple offers.
Basically, do what you can when it comes to being a seller. Do as much as you can to maximize the amount of people that can see themselves in a home, and make it maximize the by the way to entice somebody in this regard would be to maximize the amount of people that could envision themselves in a particular home, which is, as you said before, creating a blank slate. While as in the other situation, you would want to tailor the house in such a regard where they can forego to some degree how the pricing is if they feel as though this is like the ideal home, and if people feel as though they found their ideal home, there's a less of a likelihood that they're going to try to look somewhere else if they feel like this is the home that they could picture themselves in for years on end.
Yeah, I think that, once you line someone up with what they want, then the emotions, there's an emotional response, and then that's when a deal's made. That's when it's a situation that everyone feels like they've won in. The seller feels like they've won, the buyer feels like they've won. Everyone has came together and in a way where everyone's happy.
Now,
yeah, go ahead, Hazy.
I was just interested, since I see that you're on the precipice of probably one of your biggest sales. I want to congratulate you on that. But if you could take us to your first sale, what were some vital lessons leading up to that you found out that are still something that you what were some valuable lessons that you learned from that situation?
Really communication. I think in the first sale, just assuming that the client that I was working with knew everything about the contract and knew everything about the sales process, because he was in DC. There's a lot of highly functioning professionals, a lot of just well-polished people in this city, highly educated. My client was a really prestigious attorney, and I just assumed that he completely understood everything about the sales contract, and I didn't go into enough detail. And so what I took away from that was, you need to my job is to hold someone's hand and go through every bit of what they're signing, interpret it for them. Don't just leave it for them to read on their own or assume they understand it. And just be overly diligent in the way I communicate, so there's no step of the process, meaning the home inspection, the closing, just whatever we're doing, that they're kind of having to ask, what are we doing, or what is this? So communication's number one.
And for that as well, I wanted to go into asking you, if you could explain things more of the terms and conditions of contracts and other legal documents. So how do you handle negotiations and counter offers would be my first question about that.
Well, again, every deal's different. If it's a multiple offer situation, it's gonna affect how you write the contract and how you make the offer and handle negotiations. If you're the only person at the table, then again the contract is going to be you're going to write it differently, and your strategy to win the house is going to be differently. Did that answer your question? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, I was just that, and I was going to lead it up with what happens if the deal falls through, or what are the penalties or implications that comes with that. I know you said earlier to begin the podcast that hey, this is a job where there's lots of rejection, but you got to push through and look at the 10% of the success you make. Would you want to expand more on that, or was that sums it up pretty well?
Well, just to your question, what happens if the deal falls through? I don't think you need to ever look at it as what I'm losing as the agent. As long as you've maintained the relationship, meaning you still have the client, that's all that matters. So there's been plenty of situations where I've, got into a contract, and for whatever various reasons, my client has decided to void the contract. So there goes your commission, poof, right in front of your face, 30, 40, whatever, $60,000. And if you look at your clients like a commission, then you're always going to lose, because people can feel when you actually care about them and you're actually trying to help them get to the next phase in their life, or the next space in their life, or if you're looking at them as their meal ticket. And when you look at someone like a meal ticket and treat them as a transaction, there's a good chance that they're not going to come back to you in the future when they get ready to sell that house, or maybe that transaction they voided, they won't come back to you to use you to go and actually find the house they're going to buy. But let's say that they do, but they still have this feeling of just you're a number to them. they're not going to use you to sell the house. They're not going to refer their friends and family to you. So I think being able to take yourself and what's in it for me out of the situation is probably the biggest thing, because if you take care of your client, you will always be taken care of. But if you take care of yourself first, it's going to be a short-lived career. You're constantly, hunting and gathering business.
Interesting you said that. If I were to draw something I believe to be a bit analogous to what you're saying here, it's better to focus on building a rapport than to focus on building a purchase. Because a purchase can be it could be very financially affluent for you to do so, but ultimately that's not building you over connections, and connections in that regard can lead to a domino effect of more business opportunities than that one moment of time when you sold that property. Similarly, I know in terms of magnitude these aren't the same, but if we were to think about barbershops to some regard, they're not just giving you a haircut, they're trying to make sure that you're well treated for, you're getting what you want at the end of the day, you feel respected in the time, and you feel as though they took the time to understand you as a client, so you consistently come back rather than just paying your money for the haircut that might not have been what you wanted because they didn't communicate long enough with you, and you don't feel like they value you as a customer. And so you might spend your time there that one day, but you might leave and never come back. It's better to ensure that they feel as though you care about the investment it is to make such a purchase as much as they do. And so that will invigorate them to even inform other people about your expertise.
Yeah, so it's a relationship business, and when people feel like you truly care about them, and they're more out to call you when they need something, refer their friends and their family when they feel like they're going to be taken care of, and not just a means to an end.
Okay, so that makes more sense. So you don't really approach it in the sense of being you're asking yourself, this property is expensive, can I afford it? The real question is can you not afford it type thing. You're actually trying to be no, I'm here to help you, so you could have greater success in branching out, maybe that person's cousin or their grandparents or siblings or friends. They'd be hey,
yeah, no, I'm saying I don't look at the person as a dollar amount. So it's you have a $1 million budget. Well, a lot of agents are going to look at you as, okay, you're worth $30,000, or you've got $2 million, so you're going to make me $60,000 at the end when you close. Take yourself and how much you're making out of the equation. Do a good job for the person you're working for, meaning you have a $2 million budget, and you want a house in Northwest, with historic charm in the backyard that's walkable to DuPont Circle, with a roof deck. You find the house that's going to meet the person, and look out for your person. Look out and cater to their needs, and don't just look at them as a paycheck. So going back to what we were saying, we found the house we thought for the client, but they decided to avoid it because it needs an HVAC or something. Something's wrong with it that they don't want to take on the repairs. Well, don't look at them as, okay, well now my $60,000 just went out the door. Look at them as I still have this relationship. This is still my client. Eventually they're going to buy something, and they're still working with me. So when you take yourself out of what you lost out of that and refocus, feel that, they're going to feel that, and it's going to pay off for you in the long run.
That's actually a very optimistic look for it as well, because I know there's a lot of stereotypes and jokes of real estate, especially in places Miami, I said earlier, being very Wolf of Wall Street-esque, where it's cutthroat looking at people's numbers. But it's good to hear that there's actually good agents out there that consider you for you, being the person, what's best for you and what can I do to help you the most. So I think that's a really good, admirable trait to have, definitely.
I think narratively, it's enticing to believe people in such a regard, or at least they operate in such a regard. For example, in terms of medical field, some people might look at doctors as being vultures, financial, working for the big suits, companies at large, but in actuality, they're just doing what they can in the confines of not only legality, what can be done in terms of malpractice, but just in terms of what can be afforded for you and to ensure that. And there is no malice in operating that way, but there can be, I would say, disdain for those people who work in those places without taking into account the larger like scope of things. Early 90s TV shows and movies did the exact same thing, where like people who work in like regular jobs, like realtor jobs, not even realtor jobs, but like working as cashiers, they would typically depict them as like immature kids who didn't have any word experience, this sort of like obnoxiousness or entitledness to the world, that sort of thing, you know. But yeah, I think that like in a realtor sense, while media does typically like to portray people in this manner of like not caring, and even Family Guy to some regard kind of mocks people in this way, it just doesn't, in terms of practicality of how you would work your business, it just wouldn't be feasible. Like people would never want to work with you if you it was a hungry tycoon shark in this manner, just trying to sell people the worst houses. At some point, you would get a reputation for selling people in the car industry's version of lemons. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, your reputation is everything in this business, and there are definitely people who you see their names on listings and you don't want to work with them. There are developers in town that, you know, you see their names, you don't bring your clients to their properties because they've got such bad reputations. The same with agents. You see their names on properties, you know that they're not that ethical. You don't want to bring your clients to them. And it's the same thing. Like people, if once you start doing things that are not unethical or not having other people's best interest at heart, you know, clients talk, and there's agents that certain people just completely avoid. So it's always good to do the right thing in this industry or any industry.
And honestly, most of that slander we do see is just people hating on real estate agent success, I'd say, because, you know, they don't know how to chase that bag. Kidding, I just had to drop a joke in there. Like, you're just hating on the
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, I don't like them, so I'm going to try to bring them down because they're actually working hard and making money. And it's like, well, tough luck. Like, you work hard, you get money. You don't work hard, you don't make money.
Actually, yeah, what you just said there was kind of fascinating, because to some regard, people look at how financially lucrative a job like real estating is, but they don't take into how sometimes dubious it can be. Like, and when I mean dubious, I'm just saying like there's a lack of certainty. While as I can work my job as I do, I'm working with a guarantee to a financial note that will be placed on my work value. If I work a particular time and a particular amount of hours, I am guaranteed a salary. Whereas a realtor is kind of gambling with their time, their investment, and whatever property they're looking at. They're not guaranteed a financial recovery. Even if they were diligent, they took the time to do it. And I think that to be in that field not only takes a level of diligence to be like aware of like how to allocate your finances to potentially seal a deal or to work on the next deal. I think it's also very mentally straining in a way that most people don't have to worry about. You see, where I'm going with this is just to speak about bosses in a sense, and you are your own boss in that regard. But when typically businesses, whether that be your McDonald's, your casino workers, or any sort of business, there is a easy and reflexive nature to criticize the upper end of the echelon of like how the business functions. It is easy to say our business or our job is our management is incompetent. I've had people say air similar grievances when it comes to the productivity and the shipment area that I work at. But then like, for example, there are people at my job who don't work the same amount of productivity numbers at our job, and they're saying, oh, you should just give them more money because, you know, that would incentivize them to work harder. But then I ask them questions like, are they aware of how much the drivers get paid? Are they aware of how much, like, mistakes cost to recoup, or how much of a net negative it is when people don't use all the saran wrap? Things of that nature are things they have to account for. And for my brief time period of transitioning from a job that was more of in fast food places to being in a place that deals with shipping in large areas, counting, one of the things I thought was just mentally strenuous and tiresome was having to account for almost all the product that had been used in that day and doing that on a regular basis. And knowing that if there was a miscount on any of these things, or if the ship wasn't working as a well-oiled machine, the fault of whatever happens in that day falls on you. And while people are easy to criticize management or bosses, they don't want to have that level of responsibility. And so when we look at realtors who not only are operating in this like field, they also have to be the brunt of all the responsibilities. They have no person they can lean on and go, it's all their fault, or they can just like push responsibilities for their shortcomings upon. So it's a far more arduous in that confine, at the very least.
Okay, I'm not sure I understand the question.
But it was not a question. I was just building off of what he was talking about when he was speaking about how, like, you know, people perceive being a realtor as being easy. And I was just building off of that, saying like, yeah, well, most of the people are people who don't work like as a manager or the boss of the job, because that's a level of responsibility that also comes with a job that they won't notice. And I think being a manager has a parallel to being like a realtor, because not only are you the worker, you're also the manager in that regard.
Yeah, totally. Okay, yeah.
Sorry if I but in terms of questions, was there ever a time, well, in terms of like just starting off, in terms of starting off and doing the job, was it ever like really concerning? Like, would you ever in a state, because I can't imagine, to me personally, it seems a bit anxiety inducing to have that much responsibility to work and operate everything. But at the same time, was it more liberating to like be that position, or was it like at least in terms of the first initial months, was it more exhilarating, or was it more anxiety inducing to be a boss in that regard?
Well, the first couple of months, you're just like, oh my God, what am I doing? Because there was like no work to do. You're just trying to make things happen. So, I don't really know if you're like thinking about not or being your own boss. I think it's more like, how do I even get started, right? Like that's like the beginning is just you're trying to make things happen out of thin air. So especially the first year, I think the first year is so incredibly hard in real estate. Not for everyone, but I think it's really uncommon not to make a sale for your first year while you're building up, getting your name out there, letting people know that you've done a career change, you're networking, you're trying to build a database, you're working open houses, trying to meet buyers. So while there's no one telling you what to do, I think there's probably a natural anxiety. You're looking at your bank account and saying, how long can I make it without selling something? You know, everyone's story is going to be different on that. Is it 6 months? Is it 3 months? Is it 12 months? But with that clock, counting down, you're trying to do everything that you can to get things started. But I think once you're up and started, and like you're have a little bit of pressure off, I think knowing that you're not answering to anyone anymore, you don't have to be anywhere at a certain time, I think it is very liberating.
That said, so I understand that. One quick question. When it comes to just doing a job, what's a misconception that you often encounter when people hear about your job?
That real estate agents don't work, that's easy. And the reality is it's pretty hard. I mean, it's not rocket science, so it's like a very easy, hard job. It's not easy at all. And I think the misconception is that anyone can do this, that it's easy, and that, we don't really work and we make a ton of money. The only people who make a ton of money are people who do a ton of work. And so that's just the reality of it. And it's hard work. You're dealing with people purchasing their largest financial decision they've ever made, and their most emotional and one of the things that invokes so much emotion. So real estate is so personal and so emotional, and it's arguably the largest financial decision anyone's going to make. So a lot of stuff that just seems like it would make sense doesn't make sense, and you're wearing so many hats and solving so many problems to get deals over the finish line, to make it something that makes everyone happy. It makes the seller happy, it makes the buyer happy. So that's just one part of it. And then the other part that makes it hard is like, where do you get your business from? How do you get started in this industry, right? And there's many different ways, but like, it's building a book of business, and then once you have that, getting people from point A to point B. So it's an incredible amount of work. It's different than other jobs, but the misconception is that anyone can do it. They can't. I would argue that anyone can get their real estate license, because getting your real estate license is incredibly easy, but doing the job and getting your license are two very different things. So you can go get your license, sure, but actually be a real estate agent. I think the statistic is that 98%, there's a 2% success rate after 12 months, meaning you can go get your real estate license because it's easy, but 98% of the people who go and get their real estate license, only 2% are still working in the industry 12 months later. If that tells you anything about how hard it is.
And I was reading an interesting statistic on that too for post-purchasing support. You actually have your clients being around 30% more likely to recommend you to someone if you were like, let's say, offers them like resources for settling into your home. Would you agree with that, or would you say like that's a pretty pivotal thing? Because I remember earlier you said it's more of a relationship and less of like a number for your clients.
What was the statistic that if you do what they'll refer you? What was the?
It's around 30% for post-purchase support. So basically offering anything like recommending them contractors or service providers for home maintenance or repair, or basically helping them along the way if like anything is like post-finalized. Just checking in, being like, hey, how you settling in? Here's some resources. Would you recommend that for other people trying to be agents, or what's your opinion on that?
If you want to do transactions with those people in the future and you want them to be a referral source, then you continue to stay in communication with them. You know, you follow up on anniversaries, you follow up on birthdays, you follow up on home purchase anniversaries, you follow up on any bit of information you can get about the person as a point of contact, a reason to call them, to stay in touch with them. Because people forget you. You could be the best agent in the world, but they forgot they don't hear from you for 2 years, except for some mass mailer that you're sending out to your database. They're not going to use you when they get ready to sell their house in 5 years or 2 years, because they're going to forget about you. Everyone knows like 12 real estate agents, and the only way to distinguish yourself from every other agent is what I call staying in flow with them. And what that means is there is complete service after the sale. You know, you should continue to stay in touch, and you find different reasons to stay in touch. But if you don't stay in flow with your people, they know 12 other people that are real estate agents, and someone is going to be in regular contact with them because that they either, you know, play. Their children play together. They go to the same school. Their you know, husbands, best friends just got their real estate. Like there's reason that's going to put another agent in front of them. So they're going to think of that other person when they get ready to sell their home or buy a new home, if you don't make it a point to stay in contact with them. So to answer your question, yes, that's one of the biggest pieces to referrals and repeat business.
I know you said earlier as well that you're your own man, basically your own business, you do your own thing. Would you recommend at all, or I don't know if you already have this, but have like your own, I guess, office area where people could come and like meet you, walk in? Or is it more about you going and doing your day-to-day thing, and then you'll get a call, or you'll schedule time for you to like be at home on the computer? Like, what would you think about that, having like a physical location where customers could walk, or clients could walk through and like have a conference area to speak with you with? Would you see as being important or not really?
Yeah, for sure. I think that, first of all, if you're aligning with a broker, a reputable broker, they should have some type of storefront. It's very important, because if you're with some no-name brokerage that's doing virtual, you're not at a good brokerage, and you're probably not going to sell a lot of real estate. But if you're with a reputable broker who's going to have a storefront, then they should provide you with office space. And like, it's really easy to work at home because you're self-employed, but it's more productive to go into your office. If you're obviously on a listing appointment, you're going to go to a client's house. But if you're conducting a buyer meeting, you want them to come into your office. You can sit down and you can that interview them, set up a home search, find out if you are a good fit for each other. But just going into the office in general, I think it makes you more productive. If you run your business like a business, you should make money like a business. But sleeping all day, staying at home all the time, it's a lot easier to get distracted. So I would go in the office and absolutely have a space where I can have clients come into the office when need be.
And for the brokerage as well, the only big one I know of is Berkshire Hathaway. What are some other big, like, heavy hitters in the business?
Well, I think it depends on what you're looking for. Like, I'm with Sotheby's. If you want to be in a luxury brokerage, we are the luxury brokerage. Sotheby's is selling the most precious things in the world since the 1700s, and we've been selling the most precious homes in the world since the 70s. So there's a lot of bigger brokerages in town, but it depends on, I guess, what your market is and what you want to aspire to for your career. If you're just wanting, I just probably won't speak about other brokerages and what they have to offer. I know what we have to offer, and what I've looked through my career is to stay in the luxury market, and there's no one who I can align better with than a brokerage like Sotheby's.
And how long have you been with them?
7 years.
Oh, so it's from the beginning. Nice. You didn't even move around. That sounds good. So you're definitely probably a very valuable employee there, I'd assume. But if you could go into in more detail, what is like luxury brokerage or luxury real estate compared to, I guess, regular, or for like the layman who just hears that, like, is that more like you dealing with like more expensive properties, or how does that work?
Yeah, I guess there's two ways to look at luxury. Luxury is not necessarily a price point. If you're talking about being a luxury agent, I think it's more about creating, what you create for your clients. What do you bring to the table? So it's more of an experience. So it's not necessarily from an agent standpoint. If you're a luxury agent, maybe it's the experience that you create for your client. Maybe they're not buying a luxury home now, and they will be in the future. But it's really, you're just a full service agent. You're gonna take care of everything for your client from point A to point B, and be that professional that they've hired to do this. If we're talking about the luxury real estate market, I think that definition is going to vary depending on where you live. I think in a place like Washington, D.C., I would equate that to probably anything like $2 million or higher. Maybe slightly less than that. Maybe it's like 1.8 or higher. Because it really, things after 2 million start to change in this market. I think the homes change and the clients change. So it's probably safer to say maybe 2 million plus is like, quote unquote, the luxury market.
All right, that makes a lot more sense. Hazy, do you have any other questions you want to ask along the lines as well?
I was just thinking, really just on an idea of real estate, and I thought it was interesting that, like, so you work for an agency, and in terms of working with an agency, how's that different from being independent? Like, do you think in terms of like working with association, obviously I would assume that some might provide connections, but with your team that you work with, what is some of the benefits that you could inform the audience at large about?
So what are some of the advantages of, let me just rephrase. So you're talking about, like, what are some of the advantages of working at, like, where I'm at?
Yes.
Okay, so for Sotheby's in general, I mean, we do billions of dollars in sales annually. We've got the top producing agents in the world that work for our firm. Our brand recognition is one of the top luxury brands in the world, so the recognition's there. We've got the affiliation with the auction house, so the most precious items in the world are auctioned at our auction house. So we're able to bring, with our high-end and high net worth clients who need assistance with auctioning items in their home, we're able to facilitate that for them or help them with that through the auction house. We're the only real estate firm that's penetrated the Chinese firewall, so we've got a lot of international buyers because they're using Sotheby's website really to get here. If you look on a brokerage level, typically Sotheby's is going to have fewer agents in every single city that are selling more real estate, but they're selling more real estate. So what that means in a city like Washington D.C., I think we've only got like 300 agents, 350 agents that sell, and like 100 licensed assistants. So we're a very small brokerage if you compare us to someone like Caldwell Banker or Compass that literally has thousands of agents. But what that means is, we did $5 billion last year between 400 people, 350 people. It means everyone who's working at our agency is making money. They're all very polished real estate agents. They're all not just agents that are hanging their license somewhere. They're accomplished agents that are doing big numbers. So that's what we bring to the table. That's what a brokerage like Sotheby's is. You're getting a professional, you're getting a top-notch real estate agent, and you're getting a brand that is luxury.
Yeah, so it definitely sounds like a proof of concept in a sense that like there's a quality that can be expected when working with this agency, and also an access to certain properties that you normally wouldn't find just being on the market. So yeah, thank you. But
Can you also sorry, Hazy, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Could you also elaborate more? You said you had international buyers. Is there any extra complications or strings attached to that compared to someone who's like from the United States?
Yeah.
Like, let's say you're working. Yeah. Could you go into that, please?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be harder to get any type of lending for an international buyer. It depends. So a lot of those are cash. Or if they're not, they're typically paying higher interest rates and having to put down a lot more money because they're not American citizens. So I'd say those are probably some of the more challenges that come along with it. But a lot of these buyers, that doesn't even matter. They're coming over here with cash and ready to go.
All right, that sounds interesting. Do you ever look into, I guess, more like community or like local, like what's going on in a certain area, like what infrastructure is coming up, what new projects are happening, whether I'd be like, hey, there's a new local school to open, there's a new hospital, a rec center, or shopping centers. Like, are these things that you kind of scope out to see like this is going to increase the value of a property?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you look at like where developers are developing and what, where they're going to put in new commercial spaces, and if it's going to be a mixed use space that's going to accompany residential, or what corporations are relocating. For example, Amazon opened up one of their headquarters in Crystal City, Virginia, which is right across the river from Georgetown in DC. And so, like, of course, when that happened, that was a big thing for our especially Crystal City, which has been historically just a kind of a dead real estate, not dead real estate market, but just not like one of the hotter real estate markets. Just when that happened, a lot of people theoretically started buying up properties in anticipation of what that's going to mean in the future. And we still have not felt the Amazon effect. Like, it's still happening. It's still rolling out. I don't think it's fully going to be felt for, at least another 5 years. But something like that, someone like Amazon comes in and it's retailers and commercial spaces to follow, and it's only just boosting home prices.
What would you say brings down home prices? Because I've heard that, like, let's say you have already an established suburban area, and then later down the road they want to build a bunch of condos across the street, like, very like cheaper infrastructure. Is it sort of like, the cheaper the area devalues the properties around it, or vice versa, the more expensive properties being built? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could probably argue that if you're building maybe homes that are not as nice, that could absolutely affect property values in the neighborhood. Things like crime absolutely affect property value. I think if you're looking at like maybe typically like I don't know. I mean, you're not gonna like payday loan places like lower income establishments like that. I don't necessarily know if that affects property value. I think they more or less target the areas where those businesses would take off. So maybe that's a bad example. But I would say definitely crime. Like local government policies on different crime can absolutely impact real estate value. And if you were to build, houses that weren't as nice or in a nicer neighborhood, that could absolutely affect it as well.
That reminds me, you were mentioning policies and stuff. What do you think is like causing the phenomenon where we're seeing a lot of people from California have a mass exodus and moving to places like Texas? Is it for land, or is it just like taxes in the California area? What do you think is causing a lot of this?
For leaving California?
Yeah, specifically people who are like, I'm done with California, I'm leaving, I'm gonna buy some property in like Texas and like live in Texas. Like, it's an unusual phenomenon where they're having a much larger exodus where people are now leaving at a much higher rate than people are coming in. I'm just curious your opinion on that.
Well, I think it comes down to like cost of living and quality of lifestyle. And with somewhere like California, for example, why it's one of the most beautiful places in the country, it's not really a place for middle class. Like, you have to just have so much money to live there. Their taxes are so incredibly high. You're going to somewhere like Texas that only has a federal income tax. So automatically, just by moving, you've eliminated the state income tax, and your cost of living is significantly less than it is. So that same salary that someone's trying to make in Southern California is all of a sudden they've got a huge lifestyle bump by going somewhere like Texas.
Yeah, like a dramatic increase, if you will, because you're going from somewhere where you're making a lot of money, but to that area, it's not a lot of money. It's like either middle wage worker, like below middle wage worker, and then you go somewhere Texas, and now you're like upper middle class, if you will.
Exactly.
And if I'm not sure how familiar are you with the 2008 stock market crash or the market crash?
Yeah, definitely.
Would you be able to like elaborate, like, because I know it had something to do with houses, but I never really fully understood the concept. Like, someone like was saying like people were like buying houses, or could you give us like a breakdown or a walkthrough from your perspective of like what was the 2008 recession?
Yeah, so a lot of people are kind of trying to compare or make the same conclusion to what could be potentially happening in the market now with what people are saying there could happen in 2023, 2024, and what happened in 2008 was we had a subprime lending issue. And so what that meant is that basically anyone could walk in with very, very to no little verification and get a loan pretty much 100% to value for the house. So I'm going to put zero down. I'm going to sign and drive, basically. Sign this paper and get the keys. What that allowed is a bunch of quote-unquote subprime borrowers who purchased homes they did not qualify for, and not just purchased one home, purchased multiple homes on adjustable rate mortgages. And adjustable rate mortgages, what that is it's exactly like it sounds. You're given a rate, and as soon as interest changes, it goes up, then your rate adjusts based on the current interest rate, and your payment therefore adjusts. And so you had a bunch of people who had purchased a bunch of homes, multiple homes in many situations, with no money down. So meaning they had zero equity out of their zero money out of their pocket, no equity in the home, on adjustable rate mortgages. And the minute that those payments adjusted, they could not afford the payments. So what they did is they just walked away from the properties and caused mass foreclosure. So many homes just went into sweeping foreclosure around the country. And that was easy for people to walk away because they had no upfront money and they had no skin in the game, no money. And they're also letting people with very, very, very little to no credit buy houses. And so today, all that's been eliminated. Lending's much tighter. There's really no subprime borrowers. Everyone has to be credit worthy, and they have to have some type of down payment and money in the house. So So while the market has gone crazy the last couple of years, like it also went crazy in the years leading up to 2008 because of these lending policies. So our market has gone crazy too because of low interest rates, but that you still had to be credit worthy in order to take on the loan in recent years, and you still had to put down depending on the property value, between 3 and 20%, or just what the property was in the value of the property, between 3 and 20%. So everyone getting these loans are credit qualified and have money in the property. So what's happening now is it's not a subprime issue like happened in 2008. So the backbone of our housing market is still very strong. While prices are inflated, they're justifiably inflated, and so there's no one walking away from these.
Would you say yeah, that makes sense. Would you say, I guess, more government intervention would cause more of these issues or prevent them? Because I know you hear people talk about, by Biden giving out the checks during COVID that they caused pretty bad inflation that would later have more detrimental effects down the road, where we're not feeling it now, but excuse me, it's going to be happening later. Would you see that ever occurring, or do you think it's going to balance itself out?
I don't think we're going to have any type of mass decrease in housing costs. I just don't think it's going to happen. I mean, maybe in certain markets like South Florida that went up, 100, 200%. There'll probably be corrections in certain markets around the country, but I don't think we're going to see major reduction in home prices because of the inflation. I think we're going to see home sales drastically slow as the government is enacting these policies to cool the economy, and slow inflation. And you'll probably see in certain markets, like I just said, some leveling out in housing costs. But overall, if you look at the numbers across the United States, there's still lower inventory issues, meaning there's not enough houses for people, and everyone has equity in their homes, so it's not, and people are locked into historically low mortgages, so it's exacerbating the inventory issue. So I don't think that anything that the government's going to do right now is really going to bring down home prices. I think it's just going to slow the market.
That makes more sense. And you were mentioning Florida earlier. What makes them, I guess, the exception to rule? You hear anytime it talks about markets or economies, Florida is this strange outlier where whatever the country's doing is doing the opposite, whether it goes through COVID, economic policies, or, like you said, marketing. For specifically marketing, though, what do you think makes Florida unique?
Well, I think what makes it unique in this situation is you had a lot of people during COVID that were just fleeing places like New York, Los Angeles because they were shut down, and then going down to South Florida, exacerbating prices. And a lot of it came from New York. You had hedge fund money that's going down and just, really just driving up the cost of real estate. And so a lot of that's artificially inflated to begin with. It's not, it's really, if you increase at a normal pace, which I'd say between 6 and 10% a year, which is maybe on the higher side, 10%, that's a sustainable increase. But when you go to a place like Miami that went up 150 or 200% in a year, that's not really sustainable. And so I think when people start, when the economy starts to cool and people are trying to get out of these properties, you're going to probably see some type of reduction in sales price. I paid $30 million for this house. Now I'm ready to sell it for 10. I mean, that's just, it's just kind of not even real money at that point.
It's almost like playing with Monopoly dollars, basically, where everyone's just passing it around like a hot potato.
Yeah.
But would you say a smart move would be to buy property? Because I always hear people say the best investment you could ever make is investment in land. Is that always the case, or would you recommend hey, look at other alternative, media of property or values or sales?
I mean, it depends on the person and the financial goal. If I had $2 million in the stock market, it's going to yield you more than $2 million to buy a house, right? I mean, I think long term, you're probably going to make more money on the stock market. Everyone needs a place to live, so I'd rather buy. I definitely say buy instead of renting. But if your strategy is to invest in I don't know, it's a great question. I mean, if you're buying income generating properties, that's one thing too, right? I definitely buy my primary residence, but if I would want to sit down and kind of look, if I have X amount of dollars to buy, a rental property, do I want to, is it a better deal to do that than put it in the stock market? I think it's really going to come down to that individual, what kind of life they want, what kind of lifestyle. Do they want to be married to this area long term? Do they want to be a property manager? So it's not necessarily a shoe-in to say, yes, everyone should buy like a bunch of rental properties, and this is the strategy. But I do think buying your primary residence is definitely smart.
Definitely. Makes a lot more sense. Hazy, you have any other questions you want to ask as well?
I just want to add on to the whole subject matter of investments. Typically, if your job or any employment place has the ability to, if it has an it has a retirement program, usually matching them on dollar amount is usually a really good avenue for long-term investments. So they'll definitely match you on dollar amount. Typically, as we speak on that, so if they do have that, I would definitely say that's like a good guaranteed investment place to go to if you ever want to, if you're looking for long-term investments. Like house ownership is great. Stock market exchange, I think it needs a strong level of diligence, and not to say that home ownership doesn't either, but this is like one of the safest avenues you can go to in terms of investments. What's that?
Historic houses always go up in price. I think it's a wonderful investment. I mean, it really is, especially if you're going to keep the house for a long time. It typically always goes up in value. So yeah, home ownership is a wonderful way to wealth.
I was also wanted to ask you this. This is a bit of a strange question that's off topic, but you were mentioning Amazon earlier and how they're having their takeover. And do you think by any stance like AI or other corporations could have like a large effect on the housing market? Because I've seen videos of people like using new materials to build houses with. It's like this form of like plastic where it's like almost they're 3D printing a house, and apparently it's a lot cheaper. How do you think that's gonna like affect the market at all?
I don't know about building. I can definitely see how like maybe some contracts could be outsourced and like some of the closing stuff. I think people are always going to want like the human touch when it comes to their house, and when it comes to like negotiating the house, buying the house. I think that people are going to want the human approach, but I think probably like smaller elements of it could definitely be outsourced with AI. I don't know about like the building materials or anything like that. I really don't have any insight.
Yeah, I've noticed in terms of houses that are basically they can be erected like within one day, and they're like pretty standard in terms of the mass production, but certain houses have unique eccentricities that can't be replicated with this type of houses, and you kind of have to forego a lot of like alterations if you want to that cannot be sustained by these houses, especially due to stability as well. Like due to the ability to set them up in basically anywhere, you kind of lose a guaranteed level of stability and fortitude with these level of houses. So while yeah, I can see that, but I don't think in terms of AI and how it's been ubiquitously discussed and talked about, I don't think there's levels of advancement to really warrant like concern as of now. And even then, I think most agents are probably they're still going to look for agents and still having that like sort of connection to like people, rather than like an automated system that doesn't really feel like a tangible thing that you can hold accountable for whatever is going on in the housing market as of right now. One of the things that I thought was worthy to ask, in terms of just your company, is it just like a is this like solely working? I'm trying to figure out the proper way to phrase this. Do you ever have people on your wing in your company? Are you usually providing any tutelage? Are you educating anybody within your field, or is it just usually it's a collaborative process where you're just figuring out what sort of property should be sold, or is it Does that occur?
Are you taking any apprentices or pupils right now? Because I may be interested in moving to DC soon.
That guy's funny.
Not at this very moment, but that does not mean it won't change in the future.
Sounds good. And for the housing market, you mentioned it earlier how there's sometimes in places a lot. What would be your best advice for first-time home buyers?
Buy it now. Get in now before the prices are not coming down. They're still steadily going up. There's never a better time to buy than now. Just find the house, refi the interest rate when they come back down. But interest rate's probably going to keep going up for the next year or two. House prices are unfortunately still probably going to keep going up. So it's only the longer you wait, the more you're going to price yourself out of the market.
All right, sounds good. Hazy, you want to say anything as well? Hey, Hazy, are you there?
I am sorry. This is an internet connection problem, but no, I think this has been very insightful for me. I've had my banquet of questions answered, and I appreciate all the insight that's been provided by our guests so far. So I've had my knowledge questions for the most part. In terms of like the questions that come up to me immediately when it comes to real estate.
Yeah, definitely. I'd say this has been a very enjoyable podcast episode, and I'm very glad again and thankful to have you on our show and have you as a guest to give us good insights.
Yeah, thank you. I've really enjoyed being here and talking with you both.
Would you have any closing advice or any comments you want to have for the audience or people listening in? Like, I know earlier at the beginning you said that you have like mainly contacting people, but is there any other references someone could find you at for business relations?
Sure. My Instagram is Kyle J Meeks, so feel free to reach out there, and happy to answer any questions or help out in any way.
All right, sounds good. Hazy, do you have any other closing remarks as well?
No, that's everything for me. I'm Hazy Dialects, and you've seen us all in HD, and I'll leave it off to Sola Requiem to close us out for the episode.
Yes, thank you again for both Kyle Meeks for being here, and for Hazy Dialects as always being my co-host, helping me out. This has been Requiem Radio, and this is Sola Requiem signing out. Thank you, and see you next time.